Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to The Blue Dot podcast, where we shine a light on local voices shaping our community. And as you all know, we're very focused on the upcoming 2026 election and the people who want to represent you. And this is the place to learn about where they stand. Thank you for joining. I'm Natalie MacDonald.
And I'm Brian Koehl. And you're absolutely right, Natalie. 2026 is here, and we're thrilled to see so many candidates stepping up across the state. Joining us today is Brian Snapp, candidate for Kentucky House District 69, a seat currently held by Republican incumbent Steve Doan. Brian, so thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, Brian. Well, I have two Brians here today.
You are lucky.
I know.
Life doesn't get any better than that.
This is true.
Yeah. Supply is up, demand is low.
Exactly. We have nowhere else to be.
Yeah. Well, Brian Snapp, let's start with your story. Tell us a little bit about you and what inspired you to run for House District 69.
Sure. A little bit about me. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I've built a career fixing broken systems and developing solutions. So that's experience that I'm going to attempt to bring to this position. A little bit of why I want to run. And I laugh all the time because everything's moving so fast. And I feel like my why tends to move as fast as the news does. But one thing that's consistent is I'm tired of being represented by somebody who doesn't know me, doesn't want to understand people like us, and frankly is never really tried. So I'm tired of seeing the litany of harmful and hate-filled legislation coming out of Northern Kentucky aimed at attacking my fellow Kentuckians, all the while affordability and equity issues continue to plague our states. I felt the need to get into the mix and help affect politics even at the national level and help to try to hold some of these seats down for 2028 and reverse some of the gerrymandering that are in Supreme Court. In 2020, they looked at and determined was unfair, but not illegal. Jump in and help try to chip away at some of the walls that block our voices out from being heard, and to leverage some of the privilege that I have to kick in doors that keep others out. I laugh, I tell my wife all the time, I can't just sit around and continue screaming at the TV, as I watch the news every morning. At a certain point, you're just going to get labeled as crazy, right? But if you're out there actually trying to do something about it, then you're not crazy, you're an activist. But I think I have the experience to do that, and I want to see Frankfort stop serving corporations, start serving our communities. So
yeah, I love that perspective too. Just how you said what's happening here in Northern Kentucky and what happens in your backyard can actually affect what's happening nationally. It all kind of starts in this, in your hometown, in your backyard, in your district.
Yeah, and I like the way you also said, use your privilege to help others. Man, that's a great line. I'm going to use that because that is another way of saying, paying it forward, which is, we all should be focused on. That's what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to, encourage people to do.
Yeah, take it. That's how you build good teams, right? You train your replacement, you replicate your ideas. So yeah, take it, use it.
Right. And you just mentioned Frankfort is serving corporations instead of communities. So talk to us a little bit about, your top 3 priorities that you'd focus on to help bring some of that, bring some of those benefits back to the communities.
Sure. I think my 3 areas where my head goes for priorities is going to be affordability, equity and prosperity, and the restoration and expansion of our rights. So I think when you have a backlog of work to do, you need to organize and prioritize. So I look at the work that we need to do kind of through the lens of the hierarchy of needs. So you got your physiological needs like your food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. And then you have your safety and security needs like health, employment, and family. And although it's not a strict hierarchy because there's quite a bit of overlap. Like for instance, you can't have shelter, right? Or it's increasingly difficult to have shelter or housing if you don't have good employment. So I think with those 3 things in mind, I think you have a good understanding and mission to help the people in Kentucky. So diving into affordability, housing, right? That's on everybody's mind. And I think that's one area where I saw a big opportunity from my representatives here in District 69. As far as equity and prosperity, focused on fair pay, increasing the starting wage to 50K for teachers. Boone County is it set an incredible example. They were the first county in Kentucky to increase minimum starting pay for teachers to 50K. Other counties have kind of followed suit, but I want to help make that a standard across Kentucky. Boone should serve as that example. We just got done talking to some of the unions and some of their concerns, and so one area that I'm incredibly interested in driving change and creating an impact is going to be repealing some of the anti-worker laws that we saw passed in 2017. In 2017, Ford sent a pretty clear message about whose side they were on when lawmakers passed the so-called right to work and repealed prevailing wage at the same time. So both of those decisions are responsible for making it harder for workers to bargain and easier to drive down wages. And you don't need to be a labor expert to know how that is going to pan out. So on right to work, I oppose it. On prevailing wage, I support restoring and strengthening it. And I'm focused on the right to organize. I know with teachers, right? I think one of the benefits to increasing that minimum pay to 50K, like I said, right, is it makes it easier to then strengthen their right, just like we do, to organize currently. They can't go on strike, and I've talked to some of the union leaders, especially here in Boone County, and one of the challenges they have, everybody, there has an interest in organizing, but one of the challenges they face, right, is they can't afford to. So we're gonna first address that cost of it, right? But then, yeah, we're gonna empower teachers and entrust them the same way we entrust them with our kids, right? We're gonna trust that they have their best interests, and we're gonna empower them to hold us accountable and make sure we get it to them. So
Yeah, those are all super important. I love that you have a focus on education as well. And I know that this upcoming year, 2026, there's going to be a push for the pre-K for all. There's going to be a lot of education legislation coming up. So it's going to be something to keep your eye on. I think a lot of voices are being raised about education in the states. And kudos to you for, pointing out that 50K minimum for teachers out there in Boone County. And that should be something that's set across the state.
yeah, and I think another area of opportunity regarding education, I think we could do a better job of taking a holistic approach to taking care of our teachers and our educators. I know a big focus and a big ask from them right now is on maternity leave, and I want to tell our educators, and I support that. Right. I trust them with my family and my little ones, and I want to do everything I can to give them that same opportunity to start a family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's, we were going to ask about some specifics, some tangible things that you would do for voters or attempt to do, some examples of the policy. And I think you laid out several right there that would have an immediate and really substantial benefit to a lot of our constituents that are being ignored or, frankly, being screwed right now by some of the legislation that's out there. We need to get back to, as you said, focusing on how does this actually improve people's lives. I think that's what government is supposed to do. Public service is supposed to be about. We seem to have lost that somewhere. So it's nice to talk to candidates who are trying to bring us back around to what that original purpose was and should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right now, when we see a super majority in Kentucky and in the Senate and the House, right? It's currently in Republican control. When we do bust through, we want to be able to hit the ground running, right? So I think it would be irresponsible, and I think it'd be devastating to secure one of these seats, but not have a good plan of action of what to do when we get there. So I look at it. It's not all speeches. We need to have a plan during the election season. And I think for a lot of these, right, we're not the only one. We're not the only state or the only communities experiencing these problems. There's other people who are already finding and sourcing good solutions. Like with education, right? I don't need to look too far for a good example of what works. I can look right in Boone County and see the success that they're having regarding affordability and driving down some of the high energy rates and stuff. And I know we'll address some of that, but there's plenty of states that have already found good solutions that kind of attack some of these problems from different steps, right? So you just look at you know who is having success like outside of Kentucky, and we can just model that.
Yeah, and talk about complicated problems. You mentioned on your website that that's what you do. That's what you said at the top of this. You fix complicated problems. And I know one issue that's going to be coming up across many communities, especially in our rural communities, will be the focus on AI and these mega campuses. And on the surface, I feel like, we can see some growth there and there's some maybe good things as far as development goes.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, they can cause a lot of damage. I don't know if you'd like to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really exciting, and it can be, I think, a terrifying subject right now for a lot of people. And I've seen this technology firsthand. I'm responsible for the creation of a lot of AI focused solutions. And I've seen and been responsible for some of that positive change that comes out of the utilization of it, right? It's a tool, and if you use any tool incorrectly, somebody could get hurt. So I think it's coming. It changes everything it touches, but it is progress, and I want to see good governance and good oversight over it, and make sure, right, that it's working for us. But I think there's a couple areas though where I think it's failing to work for us. One area I think is grid strain, and kind of the increased energy demand straining, I think, an already struggling infrastructure. And we're on the PMJ grid, right? And they've already come out and said that in 2027, 2028, it's going to start to fail to meet some of the high peak energy demands. So that's going to require infrastructure upgrades, right? And I'll talk a little bit about what does that really mean for us. But another area
Before
where
you go, but just a real quick question for you. Since someone naive like me, what is the PMJ grid?
sure. The PMJ grid, Kentucky is on a larger like infrastructure grid, right? Like the PMJ grid covers like most of the East Coast, I think. Kentucky's like one of probably a dozen,
Okay.
right? So it's not just some of the impact that happens elsewhere, right? Can kind of also be pushed on to Kentucky because we are on a shared grid with many other states.
Thank you.
So it's
That
it's
makes a lot
it's a
more sense now.
complex and complicated issue for sure.
Okay.
So, on that note, right, with these AI campuses and these data centers that are popping up all over. First of all, we can't stop it. It's not in our control. I know there's a lot of hesitancy towards this industry, but it can be used for good, right? But these are absolutely responsible for driving up energy demands. As those demands increase, supply decreases, and we are paying higher rates due to the a waning supply of energy, right? So we're kind of hit, in the pocket, and for those reasons, right? But as the grid, as those demands increase, and the grid is further strained and fails to kind of meet that demand, right? A lot of infrastructure investments will need to be made. And historically, when those investments are made and the infrastructure is updated, those costs aren't paid by the customers responsible for that increased demand. It's spread out amongst everybody. That means, you and me see, again, a higher energy bill. Those infrastructure investment costs are passed on through your energy bill. So that's another reason we're seeing the drive due to that technology and kind of impacting affordability. And there's things that we can do. We don't have to be responsible for subsidizing this industry. And I certainly don't think we should. These facilities that are driving that demand, they're not job creators. These are often virtually empty as far as people go. Warehouses, they hold servers, so we don't see a lot of ROI, I don't think, from these facilities. So we should be responsible for front loading those investments. But there's several states again, that we can model and follow their example. There's, I think, Ohio, Virginia. There's another state that off the top of my head isn't coming to me, but they are essentially writing state legislation that reclassifies those kind of high energy consumption customers into their own customer class. Because otherwise, they just spread the costs out to everybody, right?
Yeah.
But if we have a
Yeah.
customer class that we can say, hey, you're responsible for this demand and the resulting infrastructure updates that are required, they can properly pass those costs on to the right people. Another thing that's being done, right? And I know, this is kind of another area where this industry isn't really working for us, is the environmental impact. I know that's a huge concern for a lot of people that I've talked to. The energy usage, the water usage, the CO2 emissions are incredible. If you look at those rates, they're unbelievable, even for a single facility, right? But as part of as this industry moves into Kentucky, we need to make sure that we're regulating, say, like their gray water usage, right, and making sure that they're not using clean water, that they're using gray water to cool machines, and just there's ways that we can regulate it. One of my favorite pieces of state legislation that I've read came out of New Jersey, I think in 2023. I'd like to see Kentucky do. They use the demand for their land and their resources and stuff to kind of prop up this industry, to drive investment and innovation into the green energy space. So I don't remember like what the exact percentage is, but essentially they told these facilities, hey, if you're going to build here, and we want you to, and we'll pave the road for you. We'll make it easy for you to come here. But when you do, say 25% of your energy usage has to come from green energy, right? And so they use that demand to help prop up those areas and enrich the communities that they move into.
Yeah, tapping into that green energy could be a driver of jobs that they're not bringing in
Absolutely.
otherwise, right? So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of considerations, but that can work to our benefit, right? Because I think Kentucky is poised to be a prime location for some of this industry investment. It can be responsible for good revenue. It can be responsible for driving change and innovation into the green space, and we can use what we have and leverage that. Kentucky is centrally located, and so that's
Big advantage.
that's something that we can take advantage of. We have a lot of the resources they need. We have great energy output. We have a lot of water that required for cooling these machines. We have undeveloped areas where noise pollution won't be a concern. We have a skilled workforce, so Kentucky can utilize and leverage what we have, but we also have a history though of industry coming in, extracting what they need, right, and not taking care of the communities that are here. And I, for one, and I know many Kentuckians aren't really eager for a second lesson in that. So, as we invite these industries in, we'll make it real clear this is a partnership. It's got to be mutually beneficial.
Well, that's amazing. Your perspective, obviously, you know quite a lot about that. I do want to pivot a little bit to your campaign. You have a primary challenger. And you also have obviously an incumbent on the Republican side. So can you tell us a little bit about what sets you apart from your Democratic primary challenger and the incumbent, Steve Doon?
Yeah. So I'm going to be real clear, because I know primaries can be nasty. And actually, I don't know if I told Lily this, but she was the second person in my entire life, my whole sphere, that I was interested in running. I told my wife first, right, to because you have to. But I told Willie on second, because I wanted the chance to introduce myself to her and make it clear. Look, we are on the same team. I've seen your platform. We want the same things, and I honestly believe that District 69 would be well served by either of us, right? But I think the main distinction between us is probably Probably the ability to get at like the real heart of this position as a representative. I think you really need to come into this with a plan. I don't think that this is a space where you can learn to drive and maneuver big, complex organizations, right? I don't think you can. This isn't a space to learn that on the fly. You have to be able to problem solve, and you have to have the skills and experience to course correct a big organization. And that's what I do for a living. My job is pretty simple. I sit down, and I listen to areas of an organization where there's a pain point. I work to prepare a solution, right? And then we go out and we build it. So I'll sit down with departments. I'll listen to the needs of people. I'll work to design a solution and that meets the requirements, and we build it. And I that's what this position as a representative is ultimately responsible for doing. So I think in that small area, but I think it's significant, right? I think that's what would set me apart. Stephen, on the other hand, I think the distinction is probably quite a bit bigger. The biggest distinction is we serve different interests. A good illustration of this would be the housing solution that he proposed. Formerly it was the HB 102 bill that he had written, and it was aimed at deregulating and loosening zoning standards when it comes to building homes, which I think is advertised as an attempt to build more houses, increase housing inventory, and lower the cost of homes. But what really happens there is it shifts the responsibility of solving the housing affordability crisis away from local authorities, right, whose job that is, shifts that away from them onto everyday Kentuckians. And operative word, if affordability is the issue, how many of us have the funds necessary to renovate our homes into a duplex, triplex, quadplex, right? So it kind of seems self-defeating once you read through it. It doesn't seem like a good solution, right?
It's also probably not going to produce the volume of housing that we really need to solve the problem.
Right. In reality, what's going to happen, because we don't have funds to solve this for ourselves. What's going to happen is investors are going to come in and they're going to buy up the inventory and more than likely not fix the cost of homes, which is what this is supposed to attempt to solve. They're going to buy up inventory and they're going to convert it into rental properties. So we're going to have the same issue, but now we're going to have a lot more people trapped in the rent cycle. All the while, this is somebody who isn't interested in offering renter protection. Like, that's not part of this bill. That's not part of any bill that he's ever proposed. So you're going to trap people into a rent cycle who are going to ultimately be taken advantage of. There's nothing in there that would require a certain number of homes to be built in that 170K range. So there's no incentive, because these developers operate off of like a profit model, and they can't make a profit at that range. But then there's also no constraints saying that like those have to be built. So it's just, even when addressing new homes, old homes are going to get bought up and turned into rentals. New homes are going to be developed at that 350, 400K mark. So it still doesn't solve the needs of the people. So whose needs does it solve? It works for investors. It works for developers. It works for construction companies and realtors and landlords. So it should be no surprise that when you look through Stephen's political contribution, you're going to see those same people being his biggest donors. So if the solutions that he's proposing isn't solving the needs of the people, it's solving the people that are funding his campaign. So that's why I think the biggest distinction between me and him is one of us is actually working for the people and not out of self-interest.
Well, so with that being said, are you going to be able to work across the aisle with the people who are serving different masters than you?
Yeah. So I've talked to a lot of local representatives, and I've talked to several people who already work down in Frankfort, and it may not always feel like it, especially with all of the noise that is created, right, by some of the radicals. There is a real appetite, believe it or not, by many Republicans to actually work for the people.
I just want to say I believe that, and I've
Yeah.
listened to Matt Lehman talk a couple times, and he's always like, you always hear about the fringes and the extremes, but there's a lot of really good work done, a lot of people that want to get things done.
Yeah, and also the solutions that I intend to propose are aimed at truly meeting the needs of the constituents, and their constituents feel the same pressures, face the same problem as mine. So if they are really working for Kentucky, and I mean all of Kentucky, right? Not just a select few. If they're really interested in working for all of Kentucky, they'll find no greater out.
That's great. So, Brian, people sometimes feel disconnected from politics. And, we talk a lot about grassroots organizing and visibility. What do you see out there, and how do you plan to engage voters and ensure their voices are heard in the legislative process?
Well, I mean, that's the fun part, right? Is getting to go out and have the conversations. Otherwise, the rest of it, at least for now, is just sitting around in front of a computer writing speeches, and that is not the fun part. But so it's meeting people where they are, not just physically, right, but kind of mentally and on the information level. But we are going to run a true grassroots effort here. And there's a strategy to it. I mean, the reason why, right, is like we don't have to get all the way to Frankfurt to affect change. If we're running the right type of campaign, we're going to make change along the way just through the activity of building things as we go. But that means we aren't going to rely on consultants to craft a message, and we're not going to rely on ads to get it out to voters. We're going to win this race on boots and bikes, and hitting the streets and knocking doors and having conversations. Some of which, right, we've already been doing here in Kenton County, and with the EC and through our own campaign. But the most critical part, and Kenton County is getting this right. The Kenton County EC is the most critical part is listening, right? We've done a lot of deep listening, and I think it's important. I mean, it's at the heart of our campaign. I tell people the people closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I always say, if my policies are only influenced by my life lived, I've immediately failed at this job as a representative. So these conversations that we have go straight into strengthening our message. And when Dems and Republicans go toe to toe on policy, we win. So, it's playing to our strengths. But I think, as far as engagement goes, it's a big problem here in Kentucky, for Democrats. And so one thing that I want to make really clear to all the listeners, and if you are waiting for the Democratic Party to fix this mess and save you, it isn't coming. That help is not coming, right? And at the national level, we see Dems bowing out of fights to protect our healthcare system. We recently seen in the House during the DH funding measure passed, was it 220 to 207, with 7 Democrats voting in favor of with Republicans. The help isn't coming. We're in this alone, but we are in this together, right? At the state level in 2024, 36% of races were won by a Republican running unopposed. So out of 138 House and Senate seats, 50 were just given away, right? So engagement is a real issue. It's my job as a candidate not to just get out there, but get out there with a message that resonates with people and gives them something to get excited about. And we're gonna keep working on that, right? But this problem is an ongoing one in Kentucky. And I personally think one of the most important things that we can do to motivate Democrats in Kentucky and turn this thing around is to get real in our understanding of where we sit. I am absolutely tired of hearing that Kentucky is a red state. My vote doesn't matter. When you see results like we saw in 2024, it feels like that probably is the reality. But it's the biggest lie we've ever bought into, because you can go to the Secretary of State's website and you can look at voter stats. The difference, and people find this shocking. I say it all the time. It's like, go look if you don't believe me. The difference in voter registration between Dems and Republicans in Kentucky is 6%. And you look at the big blowouts and the election results that we have, and it doesn't feel that way, but the difference is 6%. if you look at the amount of Kentuckians that aren't registered to either party, so like mostly independents, that totals 11%. And of those 11%, typically independent voters are voting Democratic, right? So if the difference between Dems and Republicans is only 6%, 11% accounts for independent voters who typically vote Democratic, right? You can infer that the true mix between Dems and Republicans here in Kentucky is pretty equal,
Pretty
right?
even. Yeah.
The difference is
Yeah.
turnout. The difference is engagement. And that's why we're going to play to our strength. We're going to go grassroots. We aren't going to outspend our Republican counterparts. They often outspend us three or 5 to 1, right? But what we can do is outwork them, and that's going to be out there talking to people. If your listeners are pissed, but they want to come and get in the mix, join us in this midterm and walk with us and talk with us as we go through our community. But we cannot do this without you guys. So
All right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you.
It's all about what happens in your backyard and talking to your neighbors and having a beer on your front porch. All these things matter. And I think it's so important. And I love what you said. If we can't outspend them, we're going to outwork them. Brilliant. Well, Brian, we learned a little bit about you. We learned a little bit about your kid. Not you, Brian.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm
Yeah,
so confused.
Hey, Brian, we learned a little about your campaign, a little bit about you. But before we let you go, we do like to do a little lightning round with all of our guests just to get to know you a little bit better. If you're up for that, 5 rapid fire questions.
Sure.
All right. Everyone's usually a pretty good sport about having these thrown at them. All right. We'll start out with the first one. If your campaign had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh, God. Music's tough because it's dependent on my mood, right? So I feel like if it was going to match the campaign, it'd probably have to be something fast paced and hard to follow. And I would say at times it might even be the Benny Hill theme song. It feels a little bit like that, especially when you're getting it off the ground. But hopefully by the end of it, right, it'll be a symphony.
All right.
All right. I am a presidential history geek. So I'm curious. Yeah. Who is your favorite president? Do you have a favorite president?
I think to avoid going with the normal ones, well, and maybe this is right. I love hiking. I love being outdoors. I love our national parks, and I really hate what's being done to them right now. And I'm not going to go into it because you'll be slamming that beep button. But I suppose I love Teddy Roosevelt for the creation of our national parks. And on that subject, I suppose I will divulge a little bit.
Go for it.
I share a birthday with Trump, unfortunately. It was really cool getting to go to national parks and getting to go on June 14th for free on my birthday. But I think this year we maybe just won't celebrate it.
I saw your Arches hat. I am a national parks geek, and Teddy Roosevelt is my favorite president as well. I actually have, and if you see, he's in the background there. I have his autograph on my shelf behind me.
Wow.
So, yeah, good one. I like that one for sure.
Yeah, I did my research.
Yeah. All right. Well, this one is a little more difficult, but if you could switch jobs with one fictional character, who would it be? Switch jobs with one fictional character. My go-to would probably be Sherlock Holmes. I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. I like mystery. I like problem solving. And I kind of like the period piece stuff. I love Sherlock Holmes so much. My last dog I named Sherlock Holmes. Best dog there ever was. So. That's awesome. I love it. Very unique. This one is going to probably be a little bit easier. What's your favorite restaurant in Kentucky?
Well, I'm a keep it local. I really like sushi. So my go-to when I have the time to go out to eat, especially with my wife, if it's just the two of us, I'm gonna pick sushi. So I would say Sake Bomb is a really good local sushi place. We're eating with the kids. We're doing Greek to me. Awesome food. Love euros. And the owner and the company seems pretty connected to the community. They seem like good people. So I like to vote with my wallet as much as the ballot, right? So spend it where it's needed.
Well, I feel bad about the last one because it's about music again. I was going to ask you what your first concert was.
First concert, I think it was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I
Very
think
cool.
that was an interesting concert.
So, Brian, great lightning round there. And thank you for sharing your story and vision with us. We really appreciate it. So where can listeners learn more about your campaign and get involved?
Sure. You can go to our website, briansnapp4kentucky.com. It's BRYAN, SNAPP, for Kentucky.com. You can also join us pretty much the same name on Facebook. That's probably where we post the most stuff. We're going to eventually branch out from Facebook, but I prefer, to keep it simple for now. It's a lot to maintain. So we're mostly just on Facebook. That's Brian Snapp for Kentucky as well on Facebook.
Okay, great.
Good stuff. Well, thanks so much, Brian. All right, that's it for this candidate interview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming podcasts or exclusive material. And don't forget, you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at bluedotpodcast.com. Until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everybody.